Hello, the Internet, and welcome to Open Source Directions, hosted by Quansight, the webinar that brings you all of the news about the future of your favorite open source projects. My name is Anthony Skopatz, your host for Open Source Directions. Co-hosting with me today is David Charbonneau.
Hi, I'm David Charbonneau, and I'm excited to be co-hosting this episode of Open Source Directions. I lead the development of open teams at Quansight and am based in Durham, North Carolina.
And as our guest today, we have Jim Bednar.
Hi, thank you for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here. I lead the PyViz team at Incorporated in Austin, Texas.
So this week's straight up at the top, we have our famous Tweet of the Week section, where each of our panelists here today presents a tweet that they have been enjoying recently. Jim, you're first up this week as our guest.
Well, my favorite one is from last night, and it's about a project that I run called Data Shader, and the tweet reads, Data Shader is our secret weapon of amazingness, and that's all it says. So, that's from Molly Peebles. It's about a astronomy paper that's about to come out where I saw that she cited the package in her acknowledgement, so I'm interested to see how it was used.
That's great. That's really cool.
I decided to go with one about the weather this week. It says, Durham is a mess. My power is still out. Bojangles is open, though. Hashtag blessed. We had a Hurricane Michael kind of barrel through here last night, and I don't know, schools are closed. A lot of folks don't have power. I didn't have internet this morning, so it's been interesting.
But we have fried chicken.
Yeah, we have fried chicken.
Bojangles. The first hurrah. For my tweet, Greg Rita writes, I've been using pandas for over 6 years. My tutorial has been viewed over 700,000 times. I still don't know how to use a multi-index and would be lost without Google and Stack Overflow. It's okay for you to feel the same. I sympathize, identify. Yeah, that was my favorite. All right, so at this point, we're going to dive into our discussion on PyViz. So straight up here at the top, we're going to have sort of a very brief introduction on what PyViz is. Hold on a moment while we may be having some technical difficulties. Is there some audio? Are there some audio problems on the? I guess some people have it working. Okay, all right. Sorry about that. So yeah, we'll be going through and discussing PyViz. And so we're just going to have a few back and forth questions with Jim to sort of round out the project. Now, it won't be super in-depth as usual. So David, you're first up.
Sure.
With your...
Jim, why was PyViz started?
Well, we work in the Python space for a long time, and we know the problem in Python isn't a lack of visualization tools. It's a lack of understanding visualization tools, how they might work for a given problem, they could work together. Basically, Python has tons of great visualization tools, and what that means is that everybody's confused. Users come to Python, they see, well, what do I do? And the result of that is that they end up using whatever random or whatever some friend of theirs told them to use that really isn't the right thing for the types of problems they're trying to solve. And so we created this initiative to try to say, okay, we're going to work together with lots of different Viz tool authors. Anyone who wants to work with us, it's great. We're going to try to make an overview, a set of tools that work well together and that are inclusive. Lots of different types of tools are supported, but that together will cover all sorts of things that a Python user might want to do in visualization. Try to make Python visualization, basically make there be no reason to go anywhere but Python to do all your vids.
Very cool. So what need does PyViz as fulfill? I guess you partially answered it there with respect to sort of being a place to go, but are there other use cases that PyViz really addresses?
Yeah, so it's actually a little hard to say what PyViz is because it's not a installable package in any. It is an installable package. It's an installable meta package. When you install PyViz on the PyViz channel, you get almost zero code that has to do with PyViz, but you get lots of packages that come together, and they're in compatible versions. So you get a bunch of packages that you know or can be installed in the same environment, and they work well together. And then you get a bunch of examples that show you how to use these tools, and you see what the strengths of each tool is, how they relate to each other, and how you can use them on top of each other. For instance, we'll have a demo of how to use something at bottom is implemented in Numba, so it runs very quickly. It's orchestrated by Dask to use all of your processors. It's rendering images using data shader off screen. It's embedded using HoloViews into a bokeh plot that's in your browser. And the whole sum of all of this is 3 lines of code that you typed. But all these packages are working hard together to basically heat up your CPU, make your fan run real fast, and make you be able to deal with very large data sets in a web browser interactively, and everything just works.
Wow.
Now, how does everything just work? Well, because we made it work as part of PyViz, and because we gave you the environment where everything works well together.
So it's kind of like a collection. One way to think about it might be like a collection of API contracts or guarantees that these tools really do work together at the end of the day. Yeah.
Right.
Awesome.
And we can do that at Anaconda because we control certain fraction of those tools, and we make those adapt to the ones that we don't control.
Right.
That's very
We don't
interesting.
control everything.
Yeah,
but we do control enough of it that we can make it all come together and work.
You guys kind of make it possible to validate the integration story actually works, that the integrations are actually there.
That's right, and they're and we find that they stop working, and we fix them.
Are there any?
We're on.
Are there any alternative projects out there?
Not that I'm aware of. Basically, each library in the Python Viz ecosystem is managed by different people, some of whom have never met each other, and they're managed independently, and they just go forward with their own thing. And that's great. That's how progress is made. But I don't know of any other initiative to try to make sense of the ecosystem. Well, there's Jake Vanderplas's diagram that tries to make sense of it as an explanatory thing. This is how things relate, but not in terms of we're going to actually make things work.
Very cool.
So you just mentioned a large part of the stack. So what technologies is all of this built on? Is it sort of limited to what you just said, Numba, et cetera, or are there other tools out there?
That's one path from the bottom to the top, and there are many other paths. You don't have to take that particular path. And we have different projects in the PyViz ecosystem. One of the ones that I'll show later is much more inclusive. That's one depth path, and then there's a project that is a wide path that includes lots of different libraries and shows how to make them all work together. And so basically, anything is fair game, but we're limited. We focus on things that work well in web browsers because we want to be able to share things that can handle, and therefore we're not on a desktop GUI. And we want to make there be a way to deal with both large and small data at both interactive and batch formats. So that combination of things steers us to which tools we focus on. For instance, we don't focus on OpenGL-based immersive 3D viz tools. Those are great tools, but they're not covered yet by the PyViz ecosystem.
I see. Cool.
So, Jim, who started PyViz?
It kind of happened accidentally.
As most great things, right? So.
Yeah, it happened to us. We realized that we'd been running PyViz for a year or so and had not named it. And we realized that we'd been trying to orchestrate and coordinate, and that we had nowhere to put our stuff. It didn't belong on any project, and we had all this stuff where we'd shown how to make everything work together. We're already making it work together, and what do? It doesn't belong on Bokeh. It doesn't belong on HoloViews. It doesn't belong on Data Shader. It just doesn't belong anywhere. Mm-hmm. Oh, we could make somewhere for it to belong, and then we checked, and the PyViz was available on PyPy. It was available on GitHub, and it was not available as a URL. But we negotiated and said, please give it to open source. And the owner of it gave it to us.
Fantastic.
So then, okay, that's what we've been doing all this time. It is PyViz.
Do you have a shout out for the owner, or is it?
It is on the PyViz.org website.
Okay.
There's another tool called PyViz that does home automation visualization.
Oh, okay.
Well, thank you, PyViz.org, former owner.
Made this possible.
So who maintains or organizes this PyViz initiative?
So inside of Anaconda, we have a group of about 7 full-time employees whose membership varies on the month, sometimes on the week. There are four people and then 3 or so other people that that rotate in and out on between different projects. And all of us are paid almost entirely by consulting projects with external government agencies or enterprise customers, a few academic, but mostly it's enterprise and government.
I see.
So it's not internally funded by Anaconda, but it's coordinated by Anaconda.
I see. So it's companies or it's businesses and sometimes government that feels that they have a stake in the PyViz ecosystem that are funding parts of it.
We have a very simple sales pitch. We basically, people find that the tools meet, say, 80% of their needs, and the vast majority of people, they figure out, they deal with it. They just do something, and we never hear from them. They have a great time. They use it's all open source. They do it. Great. Then we have another fraction of it that think it's more efficient to have us work on it. What we tell them is, okay, it solves 80% of your needs. We're going to work on it for you. We're going to put almost all that back into the open source. And the reason you're going to want that is that you don't maintain that.
Right.
We're going to give you a tiny bit of code. We're going to do this much work, but you're not going to get it. It's going to go into the projects. We're going to do it in a good way, a general purpose way that can benefit everyone. And you're going to like it, even though we don't give you the IP that you paid for, because it becomes something that's maintained and solid and stable and everybody's working on. And you're going to like that because that's what you've gotten used to already. That's why you're using these tools in the first place.
Right.
So we don't
benefit from
the, I pay for IP and I don't get it. Everybody gets it. And you get it in a solid, maintainable form where everybody's contributing to it. But that's our business model for the PyViz work.
That's fantastic. So what communities do users and contributors typically come from?
It's all over the map. Basically, we have very little visibility on who's using it until we see something pop up on Twitter or we see something published at it. And when we do, it's always surprising. Like, oh, you could use it for that. Oh, all right. So there was a really nice post from Instacart a while back that they had used our tools to understand how their shoppers move across the city and then inside the stores, and they have details mapped with everything. Okay, yeah, you could do that. Great. And so we have various different types of government agencies, some in defense and some in scientific areas. We have working with NASA. We're working with people doing hydrology modeling. We're working with people who manufacture beverages. Basically all over the map.
Fantastic.
Awesome. So I believe you have some statistics about, packaging and download and GitHub stars and things like that you want to share about all these packages. Is that right, Jim?
Yes. Let me pull that up. Where was that?
And I just want to, while you're doing that, I just want to say that, your description of the open source business model was really, really quite good. And that's something that I think a lot of us, here at Quansight and other places, Tidelift, et cetera, are trying to pursue those kinds of models. And it's excellent to see it working in the PyViz space.
It is working so far. We've had good salespeople who can explain our story very well, and we've gotten them on board, and they can go out and sell it, and they can explain it, and people appreciate it and have gotten on board with it. It's a tricky story to sell, but once they understand it, it's really nice to have everything all above board. Everybody knows what we're doing, and you're not pleading, oh, can we make this open source later? You make it clear from the start.
Right. Asking for permission first is all right. So here we go. Let's here's
all right. So this is a few of the things that PyViz considers in its purview. It's not that we run all of these projects, but we make sure these projects work well with each other. And
before you go into it, it looks like you have the webinar screen up on.
Yes, if I don't, I'm not sure that it shares. Let's see, does that work?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Perfect.
Yep.
Excellent.
Okay, so this is not, this is just a Jupyter, well, actually, this is not my Jupyter notebook, but, okay, so this is just a screenshot from Jupyter Notebook where we have statistics for downloads of Conda and PyPy, pip combined. And the thing that stands out is matplotlib. That is millions. That's approximately 4 million, and this is for September. So this is 4 million total downloads a month. So if you want to talk about Python Biz, you should immediately be talking about matplotlib. And then Plotly and Bokeh also have lots of downloads. Everything else is down below that. And part of that makes a lot of sense. If you look at matplotlib when it was released, it's 2003. It's garnered users every year since then. It's really spread and taken over. It's got a really solid user base. If you look at GitHub stars, it's interesting how little correlation there is between the downloads and the GitHub stars.
Yeah, I was noticing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, for instance, Altair, I think people really love the idea. I think, wow, okay, and star that. And Data Shader, that's one of my projects, the same way. I think they see Data Shader as, oh, wow, that's amazing, and they give it a star. It doesn't mean they're actually using it.
Right. Yeah, this teasing out the correlation between impact and GitHub stars, I think, is like a very rich subject that hasn't really been resolved necessarily, right? Like how much does the interest really reflect? But yeah, so
here's what we're looking at. We know that this is the situation, and our own projects, the ones that I run particularly, PyViz is brand new, so it's not surprising it's lowest on the total counts. It's just been introduced. GeoViews, we run GeoViews, Data Shader, Param, and HoloViews, and we're affiliated with Bokeh. And so they're kind of all over the map on how popular they are. And what we're trying to do most recently in the PyViz project is try to meet people where they are and have projects that work well with all of these libraries so that matplotlib users get more functionality without having to leave their familiar interface, the type of programming they already are doing, and we'll try to offer them, show how to integrate matplotlib into other tools and be able to have additional functionality without leaving matplotlib.
Right. So I guess one question I have is like how some of these aren't necessarily like apples to apples comparisons, right? Because matplotlib and it, or like GeoViews and Cartoby seem like they're oriented towards a specific community of people doing mapping or geo stuff, and whereas matplotlib and Bokeh and Plotly and all those are very generic plotting libraries, right? So
that's right. I briefly had pandas and Xarray on here too, but it's just too hard to tell the stories because everything's kind of interconnected. PyViz, for instance, that's an overview and not competitive with any of those, and in fact includes almost all of those when you install it. And the param is not even a Viz library. It's a way to declare parameters that you can then map to widgets you can then use to control your visualization. But the common param with this new package I'll talk about called panel is competitive with Dash. And Dash is not a plotting library. It's a way to arrange dashboards.
Right.
So these are all part of the PyViz ecosystem. That they are not substitutes for each other. You couldn't substitute param for Bokeh or anything like that.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So it's not strictly a popularity contest.
Certainly not. And so what we're trying to do is take advantage, act with full knowledge of what it is that people are using, what's out there, what people already have institutional knowledge of how to move forward. For matplotlib, you can always go to Stack Overflow and find that no matter how bad a problem you're having, somebody else has already had it. You can go there and you can solve it with just cut and paste some code. Even if you don't understand it, you can probably solve your problem. So that's a massive benefit to using matplotlib compared to something like Plotly, and certainly compared to HoloViews. HoloViews is a much more recent project. It's missing a decade of Stack Overflow code.
Right. Yeah. That's a really good point. Well, I think at this point we've been pretty well eased into what PyViz is. So do you have some demos that you'd like to share while your screen is up and everything?
Yeah, may as well. They're already there. Just to start, PyViz, everything I have that I'll talk about is accessible from pyviz.org. And these are some of the logos. It's completely incomplete. We just need to grab a bunch of logos and put them in the right size to put them on here. This is the ones that were in the project the last time I updated this list, but it is a lot longer now. and I'll show you why it's a lot longer. So first, I'll just start off with, I'll try to focus not on live things, but on things that are that other people can access. So this is a shared, publicly available notebook, and it's not running, but I'll just show you the notebook itself. This particular one, the point of the notebook is that you can get a dashboard in one line. So how do you do that? Well, it's actually a dashboard that does tens of millions of points very quickly. And here, I'll switch to seeing it running, and then you can see the code, which is, this particular one is running in our commercial product, which is not necessary. This is just how I happen to have it in a form that I knew wouldn't go down for the webinar. But basically, because it's not on my computer.
Right,
So anyway.
first rule of live demos.
Exactly. So this is a demo that's basically plotting a Clifford attractor. And what that means is collect, in this case, 2 million points, aggregate them into a 2D array and display it. And when you change these little buttons, you get a different aggregate, a different attractor. If you change the color map, you can do something. Okay, so this is kind of a trivial little app. And the idea is that it should be very easy to make an app like this. Because it's just some widgets and a plot. It's no big deal, right? So the idea here is that, so this shows you can use Numba, and then that makes this 50 times faster. Basically, it compiles it to machine code. So all this is things that collect give you a very large data frame, a few million points. And then you have some function here that returns an image. Now this particular one is using data shader, but it doesn't matter. Anything that returns an image, matplotlib can return an image, so you can put that here. And then you call the interact function. This is like what's in IPyWidgets, but the difference here is that what you get works in a notebook exactly the same as in this deployed version. And so the only difference is if you want it deployed, you go down and you do this, you add .servable to it. And what happens when you do that is that when you run, if you run this on the command line, run this notebook through Bokeh Server, Bokeh Server will find any servable object in it, and then it opens up a port on your local machine or here on our commercial product, and it serves your result. You can go back and forth very trivially between something that gives you something that works in a web browser, in a notebook, add a little bit to make it have widgets so you can control it, and then immediately you can deploy it.
Wow.
And that works with anything that this project called Panel can do. And I don't even have the list here, but it can do dozens of different libraries. Matplotlib, Plotly, Altair, actually it's over here. Here are a few of the different things that Panel can handle. Bokeh, Altair, Plotly, Matplotlib, even rggplot. Basically anything that can return an image, you can slap a widget on it and have an interactive plot.
That's awesome. That seems like it makes it very easy to tell stories about data, right? Which is kind of the point here, I suppose, or tell and share them. This
is another way that it affects our corporate bottom line, if you want to think about it that way, which is that this project Panel directly allows people, anybody who's anywhere who's got a Jupyter notebook with something running in it, can use Panel to turn it into something that our product can deploy. Mm-hmm. So it's all open source. There's no money we make off of Panel in any way, but the mere existence of Panel gets people from where they are, sitting in a Jupyter notebook with some analysis they just did, to almost immediately being able to deploy it in an authenticated way inside their organization, which is what all of our commercial product is about.
Right.
So it's the Panel kind of fills in a gap between where people are now, which is obviously they're using Matplotlib, so that's this, and they're generally using Jupyter as well, and so you can.
That's one of those questions that tends to kind of really hound folks in the data science community and research community in general. How do you get from the R&D product to the production product? And this is a significant part of that answer.
That's right. It will quickly get you from something that was just for you, your own personal little, like this particular one is a notebook here. This is the notebook behind the app that you just saw, but it's zoomed in too much. It's just a notebook, and you've worked it out. You've got it working on your local version. So this is sorry, it's updating a lot to redraw, but this is the version that I had of it that was working in the notebook with some subset of those plots. And then, but I just tell it to serve the entire notebook, and for that purpose, I add the little logo to it, and then I make that, and that's what I mark servable. So it's designed to meet you where you are, which was presumably just a little bit above here, which is that you had something that worked in your notebook. Now you add something that has some control over it, and now you make something servable, making deploy.
Yeah, that's very cool.
So I think I know you have a lot of potential demos.
I think that basically covers the space of it.
Okay, great.
That's
okay,
what I wanted to cover there.
Perfect. Yeah. All right. Well, then let's go ahead and move on to the meat of the episode. So now we're going to dive into our roadmap discussion. So PyViz, as an initiative, has a roadmap, and there are various roadmap items. And these are places where the PyViz community feels that where the PyViz community feels they're going, and what you feel is in scope for PyViz overall. And these are places where individuals can come and step in and contribute if they want, but they're also places where potentially PyViz is looking for funding on one or more of these axes. And so I think we're going to go through the first few of these roadmap items and talk about them. You can find the roadmap either on the PyViz website or at quansight.com/projects, where we have a brochure of it. But let's go ahead and just talk about this and see where the conversation goes.
So the first item that we had on the roadmap was better integration with other tools. The roadmap notes that PyViz doesn't cover everything in Python visualization yet. You have relatively little integration with 3D visualization libraries and few tools that support desktop GUIs. It says that you'd love to work with people interested in expanding that sort of functionality to make PyViz truly inclusive.
That's right. Our current priorities reflect the of our current consulting contracts and our choice of those contracts. Fact that we don't want to have. We take those that we think that are part of our strategic vision. And right now, we've been focusing on clients who fundamentally are starting in 2D and moving away from there. So a few 3D plots get thrown in there, but it's not the immersive, I've got a cave with monitors on all the walls kind of 3D. It's 3D because your data has 3 dimensions, you want to see them all at once kind of thing. But there's an entire separate community who do focus on fluid dynamics in 3 dimensions and so on. And there are really solid tools for that. None of those are integrated here, and that's partly because almost all those tools are desktop-only tools. There's only been a brief array of them into the web, and we're really strongly focusing on things that can be shared, things that can be remote, things that can be batched, things that can be monitored separately from their what they're doing. That rule those out. But it doesn't have to. So that the things we're pushing for and the things we're funded for right now. So we'd love to work with people who have a different priority, but still would like to be able to make use of the type of integration, the types of layouts, and so on that we can do.
Right, like I know the Astro. Ooh, there's a lot of feedback.
You sound fine to me.
Is that okay? Now there's no feedback. Yeah, so I know the Astro community has a lot of people who are interested in 3D visualizations, and they do a lot of that stuff. So maybe, and it seems like a lot of their tools back end to Matplotlib ultimately. So would that be an avenue for integration? Just if they can produce a Matplotlib figure or axis, and then you can take it from there?
For instance, the YT project, that works fine with panel. So you can lay out, you just pass a Matplotlib figure or a YT object, and it'll generate the Matplotlib figure behind it. And so that's in use in that community. The community's also started to use data shader a good bit.
Oh, okay.
Just because of quantity of data. but data shader could be extended to be 3 dimensions, for instance, and that would be great. And then you need tools for exploring the third dimension on a 2-dimensional screen. So we'd love to do that. But in general, yes, anything that can become an image can easily go into this to this system. If it requires your GPU and doesn't work with WebGL, it's going to be a lot harder.
I see. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So I guess we can move on now to the next roadmap topic, unless there's anything you want to add. But the next one is a better dashboard look and feel support. So could you talk a bit about what you mean by that? If that is panel or it's not panel?
So yeah, it's panel. So you saw a panel in the way it looks. There are a lot of commercial dashboarding solutions, and what tends to happen in companies that we notice right now is that the Python users play around in a notebook, they get something most of the way there, and then they throw it over to the wall to some other part of the company where they are not using Python, they're using a commercial tool of various sorts, and that's what actually gets deployed, and that's what gets shared more widely, and therefore that's what has an impact. And what panel allows you to do is to bypass that step and get directly to the intended audience. You can deploy it immediately, but what you deploy isn't going to look like what they're expecting. It's not going to have a little speedometer, the right shape, and it's not going to be laid out exactly the way these other tools are. And it's not that you need to copy them directly, but you need to be able to, if they're assuming a certain functionalities there and assuming a certain way that it should look, then if you can reach that, then you can immediately have an easier transition from where you are now, which is to throw it over the wall, to our data scientists are now empowered to affect the organization. Right now, I think there'll be a little bit of resistance. They'll be like, "Oh, that's a neat tool," but our graphic designers aren't happy. That can't represent us to our clients and that sort of thing. And so we'd love to work with people who are able to employ a graphic designer, who are able to really think about the look and feel. We're focusing on the functionality.
Yeah, that sounds like a great opportunity for a company to come in and step in and fund that effort, so that at least what ends up out of that is really tailored, or could be tailored to their particular needs as well.
Would this also be about allowing companies to use their own styling, for example, and make it look like their brand?
Definitely, and right now, Panel is built on, the underlying engine behind Panel is actually Bokeh. We're not using any of Bokeh's plotting, but we're using Bokeh's layouts, Bokeh's widgets, and Bokeh communications. On top of that, it adds our own bidirectional communication. But what that means is you can use Bokeh's theming abilities, and Bokeh already has theming, but it only has a few themes. It doesn't have a insert proprietary tool X theme. Which it could easily do so, and you can also develop a theme for a particular corporate look and feel. We have already done that with some of our corporate clients. We have developed themes that do help them match that particular one, but they weren't very general. We only did as much work as was necessary for that particular client's 3 dashboards. It's not the general job of supporting an overall look and feel.
So the next item on the roadmap is developing extensive documentation about deployment. Would you like to talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So you saw in my demo that I was using our own enterprise deployment. That's our, it's actually an internal server that we use for our own purposes that I was showing there. That's not available to the general public. It's available to our customers, but most people aren't necessarily our customers. And what it's really, those deployments are designed to be behind a firewall, in a corporate setting, or inside a secure government setting. That's what our focus is. And most people aren't in that situation. A lot of people will just want to share their own cool app they just developed. And we have had lots of users show how to do that on Heroku, show how to do that on Google Cloud, show how to do it on AWS in their own specific example. We haven't, it's actually a lot of work to collect those, test them out ourselves, and maintain that over time to show the whole world how to do all of this.
Yeah.
And it's super important for everybody. We're kind of spoiled because we can hit deploy. And so our customers are happy and we're happy and we're done. We're not paid to make that easy for everyone else in the world. And our individual users have done it one by one for their own sakes. but so far nobody's taking on the job of, okay, let's tell the whole world how to do this, which is actually fairly complicated because it's very dependent on how Heroku works or how Amazon Lambda works or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yep. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, that again sounds like a great place where you've had some community interactions to help that effort, and people could contribute more towards making that work for other platforms. But again, if a business or a larger organization wanted to pool effort there, that would be something where
that would be great for some research group or a collection of people who have a common need. Like there are various consortia of affiliated researchers. If they were to pool their effort to really say, this is how we're going to deploy it and really show it, then everyone in that group could use it and they get all their work done.
Right, yeah. Great. So the next item on the roadmap, and David, unless you had something.
I do not know.
Okay. Is GUI-based plot creation. Could you discuss this roadmap item in a little more detail?
That's a bit of it's a little more involved than anything we've talked about so far. And basically the idea is that some of the things, some of the things in the PyViz ecosystem are things that we designed from the ground up, and we designed them to be fully declarative. And that what that means is when you're trying to build a plot or build a dashboard, what you do is describe the dashboard. You don't have an imperative command. And that maps very nicely onto a GUI where you just select things and you drag them and you connect them without writing code. But that GUI doesn't exist for this. And so, but why would you want to? I mean, there are already lots of tools like that that are GUI-based plot and dashboard. Well, the reason you'd want to do it is that those tools are, in my opinion, very frustrating dead ends. They are great, and you can do this and use this, and what do you want to do that? You just stop. You just stop dead. You cannot do that. There is no going beyond what is allowed for you by the commercial product. And so they're super polished until they are of zero use. And as soon as you want to add something to the end, you have to abandon the platform and do everything from the scratch. So the idea here is that this is the opposite approach. Right now, with all these tools, you can do anything you want right now. But if you could put a GUI layer on top of it, you could get 80% of the way there or 90% of the way there most of the time without doing any coding. And then you'd hit some wall, but you would no longer be a dead end. It would be, oh, well, you get somebody down the hall who knows how to program Python, and you bring them in and you say, hey, can you help me on this thing? And then suddenly the tool does that thing. And now you can move forward, and you're no longer in a tool that is limiting you. You're in a tool that is expanding. So that's my pipe dream. It is completely unfunded. We are not going to do that unless something amazing happens.
Yeah, it's completely open for help, is what you're saying.
We're directly looking at you, Internet.
Yeah.
And it's a very solid base for doing it. Tons of plots are there, all the plot types there. They're just ready to be hooked up for somebody who is great at doing a web app.
Right. Yeah, that's a really interesting. I know there have been a couple of open source projects in this direction in the past, historically, and I feel like they also ran into the same problems the commercial software did.
I think that's for the same reason that those projects didn't start from a wide base of existing stuff. What they did is start from the end. They said, oh, we need a way to make a GUI-based thing, and they did it. And that means they didn't fill in all the stuff behind it. They only did the things that were immediately visible in the GUI. Whereas PyViz is the opposite. This stuff is all there. It does everything now. All this stuff is available. You just have to connect it up to the GUI. So you do a certain amount of work, and certain things become visible in the GUI. But when you need the next thing, it's not even a matter of implement that from scratch. It's a matter of connect it up. And so it's a different situation than those other projects. Those projects looked great, but there was nothing behind them other than what you saw. It was only what you saw.
Yeah.
If somebody could do this, there would be a lot behind it. Because it's an job to connect all that up to the GUI.
And in some ways, it strikes me that this PyViz community is actually better suited to take that on from kind of maybe a more mindset or technological perspective, where there already are tools which have very detailed formal specifications, then go and generate a bunch of plots like a la Altair and Vega Lite and Vega. And so some of those, like that mode of thinking is already something that PyViz is very, very good at. And so the kind of system that you would need to do a GUI is just another similar kind of tool in effect.
Yeah. One more layer on top. It's already
one more layer on top. That's right.
9-layered system already.
Right. It's like a chantilly cake. All right. Well, we're sort of at the end of our roadmap items that we plan to talk about, but I know the brochure and the roadmap has a lot of other items on it. Are there any that spring to mind that you want to just very briefly mention?
Well, basically, the rest of the items on it are to do with the individual projects that are in PyViz, which is that you can make each one. For instance, there are various ones about geographic support, and you can think about there are a lot of commercial tools for doing geoscience, and those have very similar problems to the plotting tools, that they are great, and they're great, and then they're done. You hit the wall. And we have the opposite issue in PyViz, which is that there's fully general support for everything, and then there are specific things to make geo things easy, but there's a finite number of those. There are a lot more that could be added that are already there in the commercial platforms, but now built on this totally general platform that can plot anything of any type, and you can just make it easier to get to the right thing you want in the geo space. So it's a pretty small amount of work on top of what we've already. I think the roadmap originally covered, say, 15 things. We've already done 7 of them.
Wow.
Just as they came up,
that's awesome.
Science needed them. The rest are not that much work. We don't need them for our own purposes, but were they all to exist, it would make a very compelling open source alternative. And it's not just open source; it's flexible, reconfigurable, retargetable, scalable, all these other things that apply to the ecosystem.
Business enterprise level kind of, tools. Yeah. All right. Well, sounds like we might need to update your roadmap soon.
Yeah.
At this point, we'll go ahead and move on to our Q&A session. So users have been asking questions both on Twitter beforehand and during this webinar itself. So we're going to go ahead and dive into some of those. And feel free to keep posting those questions as we go through this, folks watching.
Yeah, so first up, Jared Thompson asks, how stable is the syntax one sees on pyviz.org? For example, he sees a lot of cell magics with opts, and others use it as a variable. And he notes that he's not used this library heavily. He's just wondering how much churn is going on.
That's a great question, and I think that's actually 2 questions, so I'll deal with them separately. So the magics question is that we're gradually we found the magics to be helpful for our own purposes because they tab complete in a Jupyter Notebook, which is very nice, so you can explore things. But on balance, we decided they're more confusion than they're worth, so we're gradually trying to remove them. However, we have a lot of material, and it takes a long time. So there is no reason to use cell magics. You don't have to use it. There's a pure Python equivalent for everything, and we will eventually steer most users to do it that way because it's on balance. The feedback is that it's just too confusing at first. It's more of a power user thing. It's like a very quick way to interact with things and very concise, but it's really not worth it. So that's one answer. The other answer is that the PyViz ecosystem is a broad community of recent immigrants and some who have been living there a long, long time. And the matplotlib portion of it is not moving very quickly. It is very solid and very stable. The bokeh portion is less stable, but it's still quite stable compared to some. It's approaching a 1.0 release within weeks, maybe a week. It is at which point the API is to be considered stable. HoloViews is quite stable. Panel hasn't quite been released yet. It's available. It can be downloaded. I showed you. It works. It has not fully actually. I guess it had its first actual release this morning, but it's not that significant because there have been dev releases every few days, and the release is below 1, so it's kind of the same as a dev release. But it's based on projects that have been around for a long time, and we realized that we could do this in a very general way. We could really attack things, full bidirectional communication between everything inside and outside of notebooks. We can do it. We figured it out. We got it all. And so we managed everything. And so those were previously in separate projects. And so if you had been using those projects, it will tell you, stop using those. Those are really not the way to go. And so that part you can consider unstable. This is brand new. The better way to do it is only available today here in October.
Get it while it's hot.
Exactly. And so there's going to be a variety of different things. Datashader's API changes very, very slowly. It just sits there and works. So it varies per project. And that's one thing that I've already written down myself. We need an overview thing that helps guide people to choose projects at kind of a really simple level. And I think that overview page can also point you to the level of maturity. Panel, new and exciting. Matplotlib, stable.
All right. Well, Travis Oliphant asks if I am the author of a visualization tool, how would I make sure my tool can be integrated into the PyViz stack? What are the hooks for outside contributors to participate?
That's a great question. Expect nothing less from Travis. So the first thing is that panel will probably already support it. So if you just put a panel and you do panel.row and you put your object there, just see what happens. The worst case, you'll get a string representation for the object. But if your object has any of the IPython repr methods, if it can display HTML, if it can display PNG, if it can display LaTeX, any of those things, SVG, any of those things, it'll just work. And if it doesn't just work, you can add those methods to your object, and then it will just work. And so panel should let you arrange anything that can be represented as an image, as HTML, or as text. And I don't know if there's anything in the world that can't be represented as an image or as an HTML or as text. And so that's one thing. And that doesn't require any changes to PyViz or any changes to panel. If you want, you can make a PR and say, oh, okay, well, that project isn't maintained. It's hard to get stuff in there. But you can add a wrapper around it in panel that gets things, sets things up in the right way. We've done that for various things. Just it was easier for us to do it at panel than it was to track down the authors and try to convince them to put it in there. So there'll be 7 lines of code in panel that achieves that integration.
Wow, that's
fantastic.
That's impressive.
So for panel, that makes sense. For deeper things like, say, HoloViews. HoloViews supports Matplotlib and Bokeh and the 3D aspects of Plotly, because that's exactly what we needed. We needed lots of plot types from Matplotlib, amazing collection of stuff. Great. Publication quality output, great. So we got that from Matplotlib. We wanted interactive stuff from Bokeh, great. Bokeh doesn't have solid 3D support. Plotly does. So we pulled those in. Anybody who wanted to support the rest of Plotly in a declarative, concise interface, great. We would love to work with you on that. That sort of thing.
Awesome. Well, Randy Highland asks if Param generates Jupyter widgets.
It can. There's a package called ParamNB that is Param in the notebook. But when you use it with panel, what it generates are Bokeh widgets. And what we did is to make Bokeh widgets that previously were fully supported on a separate server, but were not entirely. They were limited inside a Jupyter notebook. We made them work as well as an IPy widget, a Jupyter widget in the notebook. So basically, if you use this approach, you can easily move between notebooks and not notebooks and just not worry about it, not care. Alternatively, you can have your thing in Param and use it with ParamNB to get an IPy widget out of it, but that's only going to work in the notebook. And so I don't see any reason to do that right now, so we're going to put a little disclaimer on the website saying, you probably don't need to do this, but it does that. There's another package for Param can show up as TK widgets. I think this will be the 4th widget package that parameters have ever supported, and there will be more in the future. It's a declarative interface that allows you to express your widgets without talking about widgets, so that you're not tied to a widget library. Because we're old, we've seen many widget libraries come and go, and there will be more.
Excellent.
Cool.
Yeah, I think that actually answers our next question, which was also about how PyViz is integrated with IPy widgets, etc. So
that's one way to think about it. If you so specifically think about panel, what is panel? Well, panel is competitive with Dash. Because Dash is a way to take plots and lay them out and have widgets on them. But Dash doesn't work in a notebook. So And it's on the notebook side, it's competitive with IPyWidgets. IPyWidgets lets you lay things out and have widgets on them, but it works in the notebook. And there are some initiatives to make IPyWidgets work outside of the notebook or to make notebooks be servable. And those are, I hope those will eventually come to fruition and become solid and great. That's great. This is here today. This is the only way to do all of those things at once in a solid way today.
Right. So that then again leads into another question is that Travis asked, which is how easy is it to connect PyViz servables to Jupyter Lab plugins?
I don't know about Jupyter Lab plugins, but I should have mentioned that. So there are actually 3 contexts: Jupyter Lab, classic Jupyter, and deployed servers, and it works the same in all 3 of those. So there is a Jupyter Lab extension that basically provides the two-directional communication that's necessary. So we have 3 ways to do bidirectional communication: either a standalone server, which is essentially a tornado, and then classic Jupyter Notebook, and then in Jupyter Lab. All of them, the key thing is, can you get things back and forth between Python and JavaScript? And we've made all of the components at all the levels so that it all works.
Excellent.
Abraham Maxfield asks, what's the best way for those new to PyViz to get started?
Go to pyviz.org and follow the instructions.
Excellent
Nice.
and succinct. I think with that, we'll end our Q&A session as we wrap up the episode here. So at this point, we'll have our world famous rant section where each person gets a 15-second soapbox to rant about a topic of their choice. Jim, you're first up again.
Well, my rant was going to be, don't just stay with whatever your buddy told you to use. Have an open mind, go to pyviz.org. But actually, I want you to go to hvplot.pyviz.org, because that takes you, if you're a pandas user, you can do the equivalent of pandas.plot, and you get an interactive plot that can be composable and can be served.
Awesome. Well, sticking with my theme of the day, which is weather, I don't want to worry about my data consumption on my cell phone. And my internet went out, and I had to scramble to find a place so I had enough bandwidth for this today. So I really can't wait for the days of truly, really, really unlimited data on cell phones.
For my rant, recently I've been playing the augmented reality phone game Run in Empire, which encourages users to walk, run, and explore their neighborhoods. It's a lot of fun, but the in-game economy is insane. After progressing through a few initial eras, my empire has now reached the classical age, and some of the upgrades cost $130 quadrillion. I have never been so sad to be a billionaire. That's all the time we have, that's all we have time for today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. You can find us on Twitter at Quansight AI. If you're interested in funding open source projects, including PyViz, you can find all of the project roadmaps at quansight.com/projects. Jim, where can people find you and PyViz?
I'm on Twitter at James A. Bednar, and just go to pyviz.org. We're also on Gitter at gitter.im/pyviz/pyviz. Excellent.
Join us again next episode for a lively discussion on intake, I believe. Thank you, everybody. Which is part of my, there's a segue for you, right as we leave. All right, well, thanks so much. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, guys.